Welcome to another episode of the Modern Facilities Management Podcast, brought to you by FlowPath. I'm your host, Griffin Hamilton. This is the show where I interview industry experts who share their stories, strategies, and insights into modern-day facilities management. From hospitality to commercial real estate and everything in between, we'll learn what it really takes to succeed as a facilities manager. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Facilities Management Podcast. Today, I am pleased to have Chuck Ridgeway, the Automation Technology Manager at Horner Automation Group, join the show. Chuck, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I'm based here in Atlanta, and over the last few days, we have been covered in about a half of an inch of snow, and of course, the city has shut down. So I've been dealing with that. But how are things in your world?
Very cold. I'm based out of the Indianapolis area, so we're used to half an inch of snow and even a little more than that. But the cold is still a little bit debilitating to a certain extent. There's been some school closures in the Midwest and that sort of thing because of that.
Yeah, it's been absolutely brutal down here, but that's not why we brought you on the show to talk weather. We brought you on as an expert in the field. And so why don't you tell the audience a little bit more about who you are and what it is you do with Horner?
Sure. So my title is Automation Technology Manager, as I've already covered. But basically, Horner is a family-owned business, but a pretty good-sized one in the automation market. Now, my background personally is I'm an electrical engineer by degree, and I've been around a while. And I started out early in the factory automation area. So one thing that's a little bit interesting is the college I went to for engineering is a little different than most engineering schools. It's 100% cooperative. In order to even start as a freshman, you had to have a company that would sponsor you for every work section. So in other words, you'd go to school for a 3-month semester and have 3 months working at your employer, and you'd alternate that for 5 years. So at the end of 5 years, you had 2.5 years of work experience plus a 4-year degree. The reason I even bring that up is because that was really my first exposure to how companies work. I was employed by a stamping plant, a company that stamped out auto parts, Fisher Body. So that shows you how old I am because that company hasn't been around for a while. But you would think as an engineering student, they would start you out and you would work your entire career as an intern in the engineering department. But that's not how that worked. So they would move you around from department to department. So I was in personnel and engineering and maintenance. And I spent time in the facilities department. So that's really the first time I got to realize that there's more to making, car parts in that case than just the equipment that assembles everything. You got to have facilities, with compressed air and temperature and power and all those sorts of things to make it all work. So that was a little bit of an eye opener for me. But then after my career started, and I was truly in the automation field, and then when I started working for Horner 35 years ago, we manufacture automation products. So we manufacture the products that other companies use to automate different processes, whether that's in a factory or in a building. And that's where things really, my eyes were open to how wide of a market automation really is. It's not just about robots and assembling automobiles. It's also about systems in buildings and systems on campuses and all different types of systems that need some level of automation. So whether you're talking about compressed air or irrigation or backup power or whatever the case may be. So automation is truly a really wide area, and it definitely includes a lot in the facilities area.
It does. And I feel as though many people hear that word automation and there's a bit of reluctance to go all in, or there's a bit of hesitancy to adopt automated workflows there because, they think of all my manual job that's eliminated. That's my job. And you mentioned robots, and we'll talk about AI here in a bit. But I think that's a common misunderstanding on how automation really works and what it is. So do you find that to be the case where there is a bit of confusion or hesitancy or reluctance to adopt automation technology in a facilities management strategy?
I would agree with that. I would think in general, people think the way, just as you described. They're concerned that, a lot of jobs will be eliminated. They're concerned that things will be out of their control, that the systems will be too complicated for them to operate, and all those sorts of things. And a majority of things that are automated in general are not automated to the fullest extent. Where you turn on the power, you close the door, turn off the lights, and the robots work for the entire shift.
Right.
Some of that does exist, but that's not generally how automation works. It's really more about connecting your systems is the first step, right? Understanding what's happening in your facility. How much power are you using? Where is it being used? How is your lighting being controlled? Could you save energy or have a more efficient system by implementing some level of lighting control, at least being able to have more control than a single light switch for an entire or huge room or something, all those sorts of things. So there's a lot of different levels to automation. And really the first step is connectivity, because you can't improve what you don't measure, and you can't measure what isn't really things that you don't have visibility of.
And on that note, as far as someone implementing that type of strategy, I mean, what issues or hurdles do you see people face when they say, yes, I want to adopt automation technologies, but it may be a difficult process to go through with that first step? I mean, what have you seen to be brought up as far as struggles there?
Right. So the first thing is start small. Don't try and solve world hunger in a single step, right? Don't try and automate everything all at once. Start small. Start with the things that are going to have the biggest impact first. So go through your facility, rank what are the issues that you face. Are you trying to reduce your energy usage? Are you trying to have more efficient, maybe you're struggling with some of your heating and air conditioning in certain parts of your facility. Maybe you're using backup power, or you want to use backup power. There's lots of different potential issues, but rank what your issues are in your facility, and then prioritize simple steps that you can take to address that. And the first step, as I mentioned earlier, might just be measurement. It might be just connecting sensors, maybe power monitoring equipment, so you can learn what is causing some of the issues you have, and then come up with simple strategies to address that. So that's the theme. Measure what you can and start small and take it one step at a time, addressing those things that have the biggest impact first.
Do you find that you mentioned energy a couple of times already? Do you find that sustainability projects and initiatives there are probably the most common first step people take, or I guess second question to that, have the most impact immediately?
Well, it's going to depend on what the situation, of course, but certainly energy cost is a big portion of the cost for a lot of businesses, including the facilities. So yes, a lot of times they're going to address what affects the bottom line first. And a lot of times energy is a big line item. And so that it's not uncommon for them to start there because they feel like they can have the most impact there.
Sure. And it all goes back into, and we were talking prior to hitting record, but it all goes back to data. And we'll talk about AI and the trends of the industry, but it truly does start with capturing and measuring what you are really implementing, right? Like, what kind of impact is this? And that goes back to the data. And so as the industry becomes more data driven, I think that is where this sort of technology is going to be really standard across the board, and assumed part of the tech stack and facilities. And so talk to me about how you view data and the importance of data within automation.
Sure. So the first area where data is important is, again, you can't improve what you don't measure, right? So if you're not measuring something or you're not aware of the measurements, then how do you know if you're taking steps to make improvements? So that's the first step. The second area is really looking forward is in the AI arena, right? Because there's a lot of talk about AI these days, and there are certainly implementations going on with AI today, but there's also lots of different areas of AI. And one of the areas of AI that's undergoing the most development is machine learning. But machine learning, which doesn't just mean machines, by the way, it also applies to facilities. But machine learning is a very data hungry technology. So the way that works is you would feed in potentially 2 years worth of data, maybe even more, into a machine learning model, and it would spit out information that's going to help you make improvements and be more efficient and all those sorts of things. But again, you've got to have, in a lot of cases, 2 years worth of data to even start. But that data doesn't have to be gathered from the point where the machine learning technology is available. It can be gathered today. So if you are measuring and gathering data in a reliable, repeatable manner, so in other words, not just walking around with a clipboard, if you're gathering the right data, again, reliably and repeatably, and logging that over time, At the point at which the technology is ready for you to use, you're going to have that data ready to feed it. Because if you don't do that today, then as soon as that technology is ready, you're going to have to wait 2 years, as an example, before you can really take advantage of it. So that's really what we're encouraging our customers to do. Yes, pay attention to the AI technology that you can utilize today, but more importantly than that, be ready for it by gathering the data immediately.
Hey listeners, real quick. This is Alex Cummings, CEO of FlowPath, an industry-leading CMMS designed and built by operators to fit the scale of any organization. I'm excited to share with you that FlowPath now offers a tier for teams that just need core CMMS functionality on simple monthly contracts and at a price that makes sense. We call it FlowPath Core, and it runs on the same powerful FlowPath software that thousands of professionals rely on every day. So come check us out at getflowpath.com and see just how easy it is to get started with a software designed to fit your needs. Oh, and mention this ad and you'll get 10% off your core subscription. Okay, enough from me, back to the show.
Sure. It's, something that I love the saying, begin with the end in mind. And so looking ahead in a couple of years when the technology is readily available, you want to take advantage of it and have as much data in your back pocket as possible. But taking a step back and breaking that down, when you say collecting data, if I'm listening to that, where do I even begin? Right? What data? Because there's so much out there that in a facility you could start capturing. So how do you view that and put it into buckets as different data points that you could start capturing now to take advantage of machine learning technology?
Sure. So really the big thing is in a lot of cases, in a lot of facilities, there's already intelligent devices that are installed in the facility, and they're basically sitting there doing automation or doing their job, whether that's, controlling the environment or whether it's monitoring energy, whatever the case. So there's typically a lot of intelligent devices already in most facilities. So what companies can do is interface with those existing devices, typically through something called an edge device. So an edge device is a device which can communicate with existing intelligent systems, like a programmable controller in a factory, like a building management system, like a lighting controller, like a energy monitoring device. Those are all intelligent systems, and an edge device is designed to interface with those sorts of devices and gather data from them, and then send that data somewhere where it can be logged and monitored on a real-time basis. So that would be one of the first steps, is identifying what systems in your facility are already intelligent, and then evaluating how you can take the intelligence from within those devices and get them into something like an edge device, which can then, communicate that data either to some sort of internal server type system or maybe to a cloud-based system. And there's all kinds of companies these days that can help you get that data from your intelligent devices and your edge devices to some sort of, recording system, some sort of cloud service, or if that cloud service doesn't meet your corporate requirements, some sort of internal server-based system.
And so what's in your mind, what's that next step? So you're talking about the existing intelligent technology or intelligent systems that are on site, but looking ahead, what are some other areas where you can collect data that it might not be as common, but you are seeing that to be a more common trend nowadays?
Well, sure. So, in general, what's being gathered that hasn't been gathered in the past is basically everything. I hate to give that sort of answer, but
yeah.
Generally, in a lot of facilities and a lot of factories, there's a lot of standalone systems that work just beautifully on their own, but as a cohesive unit, they're not all part of a cohesive system. So really, again, it all comes down to what do you actually have in your facility and how can we tap into that? That's really the big thing. Don't think of all these separate systems as islands of automation or islands of functionality. How can we think of them more as a cohesive system, even though they're different generations and they serve different functions and those sorts of things? So looking at things as a cohesive unit would be, I think, a difference that people haven't thought about before.
Yeah, I view it as the maturation of the tech stack in facilities management. That's something where, to your point, we've had these different technologies and now it's creating one unit, as you mentioned, and being able to leverage that data that's being collected as much as you possibly can. which that takes me to kind of more so looking ahead. You mentioned having 2 years of data to take advantage of machine learning. When you say that, how do you foresee people actually leveraging machine learning within facilities management?
Well, as an example, we may all think that, there's been a lot of development over the years with controlling our environment, right? The HVAC area of facilities management. And so, there's been a lot of technology and a lot of algorithms that have been implemented over the years to make that as efficient as possible. But there's a lot of things that have been missed. So as an example, at Horner, we have set up, we recently purchased a new facility, a new building, and we installed just all kinds of temperature sensors around that facility and on top of the standard HVAC system. And with the intention of that was to be able to feed all that temperature data into a system that's recording everything that's going on at the facility, so that we can gather that data so that, in 2 years, we'll be able to feed back, utilize some of these machine learning algorithms to more efficiently control that building. So, that's an example. Again, even though there's been a lot of technology over the years, there's going to be things that the machine learning picks up that, previous algorithms haven't been able to gather. In our case is a little bit extreme. Most of the time, you wouldn't install a completely separate set of sensors to gather that data. You would just take advantage of the sensors you already have, maybe expanding the number of sensors to cover some of the areas that otherwise might be missed.
Sure, complement your your existing tech stack. Yeah, that certainly makes sense.
Yeah.
No, this has all been incredible, and you've done a really good job breaking down what could be an intimidating topic here in the world of facilities management, and really what is top of mind for just about everyone I talk to. So if you were to take a step back and simplify this, kind of recap what we've talked about, what would you say your biggest piece of advice to someone listening to this episode would be?
Okay, evaluate what you have. Okay. Evaluate what are the biggest issues that you're facing with your facility, and then come up with a simple strategy to take one step at a time to address that. Make sure you can measure whatever that is, and then make sure you have good data for you to look at first, and long term for you to feed into AI, but short term for you to look at first. Good data means you can make good decisions on improving that area that's difficult for you. So that would be the big thing. Take one step at a time, and let's not get too intimidated by the overall end goal. Let's start small.
That's great. And Chuck, I appreciate you coming on. And before I let you go, I've got one last question for you, and it's one I ask everybody, and that is, who or what has had the biggest impact on you and your career?
Who has had the biggest impact on me and my career? Well, I would say probably our owner, Phil Horner. So I've worked for Horner Automation now for 35 years. Before that, I worked for General Motors and I worked for Square D, two great companies, much larger. But a lot of what I've learned in terms of customer relations, in terms of how to take care of customers, how the customer is really responsible for for us to make a living, all that, I would say he is the biggest, has had the biggest impact on me, certainly. And his mother, his parents started the company back 75 years ago now. And they were involved from the beginning, setting up a culture in the company, a customer-centric culture. And so I think that's probably had the biggest impact on me of anything. How is what I'm doing, how is that impacting our customers? And is it helping the customer? Because if it's helping the customer, then it's helping us.
Sure. That's great. And it is really cool to see a family owned business grow. And you having been there for almost 4 decades, that certainly speaks to how much you do value that. So that is great. And once again, Chuck, I appreciate you taking the time to come on and share your insights here. In the show notes for this episode, I'm going to have some links to your LinkedIn as well as to Horner as well. If anyone has any further questions, they'll certainly be able to reach out to you guys. But for all of those listening, make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, be good. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Modern Facilities Management Podcast. Make sure to subscribe for future episodes and follow us on LinkedIn for more facilities management content.